technology-enabled recovery in the age of social distancing. We are Open Hub, technology hub for Mid-Hudson Valley, Orange, Ulster, and Dutchess counties. My name is Shelley Tween. I'm communications coordinator for Open Hub. And we're going to be continuing this webisode series because it's been pretty successful. So yes, this is our 5th episode, but no, it's not over. So I'd just like to tell you something, or whoever's listening, something brief about Open Hub. A tech hub works to bring all kinds of people together around tech. So yes, we specialize in lots of trainings, but we also have a startup incubator. We hold hackathons. We have an annual tech conference. We talk with stakeholders who do investment in the Hudson Valley and people who run schools, and we talk to people who do trainings, and we bring businesses and talent and everyone together to work cooperatively to get a tech-driven economy, a strong and accessible tech-driven economy rolling in the Hudson Valley. We could use it. These pictures, if you're looking at them, is from Newburgh Girls Can Code Club. We love this club. We love this project. And the picture on the right is from our hackathon last year, which we're going to have more this year. So upcoming is the Hudson Valley Tech Fest 2020, which will be in October, most likely, mostly online, perhaps a little bit in person. We'll see. But we'll definitely have the hackathon component to it, where we pair youth and professionals together to work on projects for the day. It's a really exciting day. And we have many speakers already starting to be lined up. And this webisode series is an investigatory sort of investigation in preparation for the theme for the Hudson Valley Tech Fest. So education and technology is such a rich subject that we will definitely be having speakers that speak to education and technology in the Tech Fest. And that's why we're having this webisode, and we're so excited about it. And even more than that, really pleased and honored to have Andrea Teodoro as our moderator today. So Andrea, if you are ready, it would be great if you could introduce yourself and a little bit about your own upcoming conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Shelley. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited to be a part of the webisode and the different activities that Open Hub Project has been putting together and facilitating over the last year. It's really been a pleasure to be involved. I am an assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction and technology at the Highland Falls Fort Montgomery Central School District. I've been there 10 years. And I'm also representing NYSCATE, New York State Association for Computers and Technology in Education. I'm the director for the Hudson Valley region. So I love the Hudson Valley. I'm a lifelong Hudson Valley resident, so it's quite exciting for me to be here. Thank you again. Today we're going to be talking about the pivot, but before to remote instruction and the implications for our students and learning. But before we do that, I am going to mention an upcoming summit that NYSCATE is sponsoring. It's a cybersecurity action summit around that nexus of cybersecurity and the need to create a culture of privacy in our schools and the implications for that practice. In January, New York State, the regents adopted Ed Law 2D and the Part 121 regulations regarding strengthening data privacy and security in New York State, our educational agencies, and an effort to really protect personally identifiable information. So the purpose of the summit is to run 4 different strands, one targeting our technicians and looking at the best way to identify, respond to potential cybersecurity incidents. A second strand on how do we train staff to be more aware of the need for privacy. And what does that look like if I'm a classroom practitioner? And how do I support efforts to really protect our students' personally identifiable information? The third strand is related to the standards that were released for computer science and digital fluency. There's a draft, the draft standards are available. The Board of Regents acted on them in the spring. And so there are just a couple tweaks that are going to happen to those, but one of the concept areas in those standards is computer security or cybersecurity. So how do we map cybersecurity across our curriculum from pre-K through 12 so our students understand the need to protect their own data? And the fourth strand particularly looks for at central office or administrators and the practices and policies that need to be in place to support all of those efforts. So that's on July 14th, which is next Tuesday. We still have space, so if you're interested in joining us, you can go to nicegate.org and look for that under special events and register. So thank you for letting me talk about that a little bit. All right. So next steps, I guess, Shelley, I'm going to look for your lead. We want to introduce our panelists. Is that what we're doing, or we're going to jump right in? Oh, you're muted.
Either way works.
Yeah. If you want, we could go back to the previous slide and you can talk about what we're going to be talking about and then introduce everybody, and we'll just get the conversation rolling if that works for you.
Sure, that's wonderful. We can absolutely do that. So the theme of our webisode today is maintaining relationships and engagement through social distancing and thinking about what that means under that umbrella of remote education. And we have representatives here from our co-schools, after-school programs, colleges, workforce development. And how do we look at supporting our students as we moved from this environment of our physical, face-to-face, brick-and-mortar schools that have been around with this model for well over 100 years. And then suddenly on March 13th, we were asked to make that switch to a remote setting and move overnight from that brick-and-mortar setting to a digital setting where everything moved online. The content moved online, the connection with our teachers moved online, our schedules moved online. And one of the things we know is that, we understand that we have what we call digital natives, right? We keep calling this generation of learners digital natives as if they're simply whizzes at everything computerized. And one of the things that quickly came to light as we made this pivot is that our students know what they know how to do with technology, but they don't necessarily know how to learn with technology. And they continue to need this personal support, the scaffolding, the reassurance that technology doesn't provide. It is simply a tool and not a teacher. So if we look at the pivot that we had to make, how did we do that in a way that kept us connected to our kids, that kept learning moving forward, and gave us a deeper understanding of what the digital divide means in the Hudson Valley? So that's what we're going to be diving into. So before we get into those conversations, let's meet the other panelists that are here with us today. So we have Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. My name is Elizabeth Thomas Capello, and I teach computer science at Newburgh Free Academy, the main campus. I also work with a program called the Early College High School. It's a partnership program between Marist and Newburgh, which allows students, as they move through their 4 years of high school, to obtain up to 24 computer science credits. So I've been with that program. It's in its second year, and I've been with the program for 2 years. I also adjunct at Mount St. Mary as well. And I'm happy to be here and discuss these topics.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. It's great to see you here.
Thank you.
I don't know if Sonia's with us, Dr. Taylor's with us, but I know that...
She was entering, yes.
Oh, there we are. Wonderful, wonderful. Can you please join us and introduce yourself?
I certainly can. Nice to be here. Hi, I'm Sonia Abby Taylor. I am an associate professor of education at Mount St. Mary College. I teach primarily special ed classes. I also work very closely with Bishop Dunn Memorial School, which has gone through the pivot very quickly and very well, given the change that we all went through in early March. And I think that working with all of you to hear what is going on will be a very beneficial experience this afternoon. Thank you for doing this, Yulia.
You are very welcome. And Sonia, you have your colleague, Ludmila Smirnova, with us. Ludmila, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Ludmila Smirnova. I am a professor at Mount St. Mary College, and I've been teaching remotely online courses since 2005, I guess.
Oh.
So I have a long experience. And so I just wrote in the chat that COVID happened on the day of my birthday, and it's now it will be remembered by my family and me. But I was on sabbatical this semester, and I was not teaching. But I am glad to be here and discuss this topic because I have just experience of teaching online.
Thank you, Ludmila.
And it was also very pleasant that during this time I got so many messages from my students because I was pushing my face-to-face classes, my students, to use technology, and I was using those tools in my face-to-face classes. And when this happened, my students were writing to me, "Thank you, Dr. Smirnova, you were pushing us to use these tools. I'm now using them, and I teach my other teachers in school to use them." So I was very happy to hear that. So happy to be here. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ludmila. Tova.
Hi. Hope everyone can hear me and see me okay. I'm very, very happy to be here. My name is Tova Goldfarb. I teach 6th grade STEM technology at Poughkeepsie Middle School. I have a master's in STEM education from SUNY New Paltz. And I'm a digital native myself, if you could consider that term. So I personally felt very prepared when everything moved to distance learning. However, my school in Poughkeepsie and my colleagues were not so prepared. And even though I teach technology in the classroom setting, my students were not prepared either. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and how we can move forward to a very uncertain school year, not only for this school year, whatever happens in 2020-21, but to move forward with technology in the future. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Great. Thank you, Tova. Great to have you here. And David, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon. My name is David Chukowski. I'm a teacher in the Hyde Park Central School District. I teach at F.D. Roosevelt High School. Like several of my other panelists, I teach computer science predominantly and have also been helping to get a Computer Science Teachers Association started here. So creating a community of colleagues, and that's been very interesting with the communication, maintaining that during this, as well as the challenges of working with our students.
All right, great. Well, that'll be great to have as a part of our conversation. Definitely. Thank you so much. And Meg.
Margaret.
Hi, how are you? Can you see me?
Not yet.
No.
Yet.
Let's see.
Yes. Yes, now.
Okay, great. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Meg Koifer. I'm from the STEM Alliance, and we are a local nonprofit that has as our motto to create a network of STEM learning opportunities. There are really 4 big things that have been happening for us since the COVID world, let's say, has come upon all of us. The first, like many, is that we did convert much of our after-school programming to, we worked to convert that to online experiences. But more importantly, we immediately put into place a program called virtual mentoring. And the concept there was to basically work with kids who were able to have a device and Wi-Fi connectivity, but simply needed one-to-one support in order to function effectively on the distance learning platform. And that program really had three top priorities. The first priority was actually digital fluency. The second priority was connection, that mentoring piece, like any type of mentor program. And the third was actually the homework help. We really saw that as not the most significant priority. The first two were much higher and more important for us. The second initiative was a Digital Equity Now initiative that we're launching, which is a program to provide a device and Wi-Fi connectivity and 15 hours of beginning tech education to low and moderate income residents in the Westchester County area. The third program, and I'm actually talking to you today from that headquarters, so I apologize for any background noise, is that we converted our summer program for low-income children to an entirely virtual program. And so we have 50 young adult staff, about 10 professional staff, and 200 low-income children that we're serving in a virtual program that is up and running as of this Monday. So it's been a very, very exciting week for us. You know, that's kind of a brief summary of what we're up to, and I'm happy to dig in and give more kind of philosophical approaches. I think this conversation today about connection is of very, very strong interest to us because it was our natural instinct from the beginning that technology is actually a great tool for connection, and we wanted to leverage that right off the bat. And that also really a relationship with technology and a successful growth curve on your ability to use technology, even though we talk about digital natives, that's not the population that we're working with. I wouldn't use that term for them at all. These are families that have struggled tremendously, and in fact I think the parents in particular feel, I don't think it would be too strong to say humiliated in front of their children when they can't help. And so there's been a lot of desperation, and I think that it is relationships that create digital resilience and grit in order to push forward when something is so new and so non-intuitive. And so all of our programs have been deeply based in relationship in order to get families into digital resilience and grit. That's a brief summary.
That's great, thank you. But I think that pushes us right to one of the 4 questions that we have outlined for today. So you mentioned this notion of, or not a notion, but the reality of a digital divide across 3 specific areas. One is access to broadband or internet access. The second is access to devices. And then the third is access to skills. And I would say that a 4th even is access to knowledge in terms of digital citizenship and interacting in an online environment. So we're really looking at divides in those areas and also knowledge in terms of how things operate in general. And so as we made that pivot on March 13th from being in brick and mortar to moving to remote, what was our experience with making that shift and moving to a digital setting, given that these 4 divides, these 4 elements of a digital divide are very real? What have been your experiences with those 4 areas? Tova, did you want to comment? I see you came on.
I just saw that we should keep the mic on, or the mic and the video on, but I can speak first on the topic if
Sure,
you'd like.
go ahead. That would be great. As a classroom teacher, I'm sure your experience was very unique.
Yeah, as a classroom teacher in an urban school district where many lacked access to devices, many students lacked access to trustworthy internet. Like other folks were saying, families were not able to give the support that was necessary for online learning, and it caused a very large drop in engagement. Students were having very great difficulty logging on and completing assignments, especially to the level and the caliber that we expected from them. in the classroom, and we need some very big reframing in order to be effective in September.
Okay.
I think I can speak on that. Let me just tag onto that from a classroom instructor standpoint. I think everything that Tova said was exactly spot on. And from my standpoint, when we immediately came online, there were many students that I taught that were just gone. They were completely gone. They could not be accessed, and they're able to be tracked during the school year. They might come to school for various reasons that get them up and out of bed, whether it be food, being able to have 2 good meals within the school day. It might be a class that really gets them motivated to go in. But that was gone. And I think the safety of the students became a major priority. I also think that Newburgh did an incredible job. They completely mobilized, everything from food to dealing with, getting out Chromebooks to various students that didn't have those devices in their homes. And it really took an entire community to get that movement from a physical space to an online environment. And to see that in real time is something, as an educator, that I will never forget. Really amazing. And but we could talk for a long time about the absence of the students and the definite lack of engagement. Starting off in the beginning, it was okay, but as it dragged on, just really hard to keep that going, especially at the high school level.
I'm going to extend that slightly more, Elizabeth. Not only did some students just disappear, but I would say instead of a digital divide, perhaps we might even look at it as a digital sieve, because it kind of did cut off, and only those who were digital natives, if you want to use that terrible stereotype,
Yes.
only those students remained present. So it wasn't even just access to devices. It was, what limitations does teaching through a device cause? So now I had students who had disabilities that prevented them. They had the internet, they had the device, but their disabilities could not be accounted for. And so it became very much a digital divisive thing.
Yeah.
I would say also one of the things that we have really learned too through our virtual mentoring program, which was a one-to-one program. It's a pilot that we started immediately with 50 kids, because we also were in a community where there was enormous mobilization to get devices to kids, but that doesn't leverage up the tech education and the ability to engage. And I think any one of us, if we've ever been through a frustrating tech experience, the thing that is the game changer is one-to-one help. And that's why we get frustrated when we can't get those tech desks to answer us, right? We don't want to send a message. And so to your point, whether it be disability, whether it be other types of styles of learning or basic knowledge, if you layer on each of those barriers, then ultimately it takes one-to-one help to get a child to be, and a family to engage in a consistent manner. The other thing that we're really working on in this summer program is, quite frankly, it takes a unique experience. And I think we as educators as well got into the habit of just first putting a structure up so that we knew what we were doing. And many of us failed, quite frankly, to understand that we need to offer a diversity of experiences. Kids, vote with their feet. And they're not coming back because we're not offering ways for them to connect. We're not offering a diversity of ways for them to receive the information. All of the same modalities and responsibilities that we have in the classroom need to exist in the digital platform. And so for this summer program, for example, that's what we're emphasizing. Everything is live. There's nothing that's videotaped. And one of the trainings and work that we did with the staff going into this was, why would you get up and come to this program? Because if you can't answer yes to that, we haven't gone where we need to go. Because we have to accept that there's something about being on the screen that becomes a drone. and that we have a responsibility and an obligation to make sure that our experiences are diverse in the way that we engage with the kids, such that they show up, because they're going to vote with their feet. So that's our work.
This is very interesting background discussion happening in the chat. Can Shelley or Andrea just voice it out, or maybe we should ask the authors?
Yeah, I don't see. Okay, I didn't see the chat. Sorry about that.
No worries. Let's ask Shelley to help.
Yeah, Shelley, that would be great.
Yeah, if you want that I'd love to.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'm just going to the proper place. Tom responded with, the divide also exists between parents and their own knowledge of how the technology works. I have a candy in my mouth, sorry, and how they can help their children with it. So that was one comment. And Elizabeth said, absolutely, complete absence of connection and little way to truly connect. So that's what we have so far.
And Eric Schumacher, I'm hoping I'm saying your name right, Eric. He also had students that just refused to answer any messages, so they just drop off. They're not forced, right? Eric, would you like to elaborate on that? Okay, we have one more comment.
I had students that just like, you could call them, you could email them, you could message them through the learning messaging systems, but they just, and we even had sent out the student resource officer to their home, and they didn't respond to anything. It's like they hid in a hole.
Absolutely. So those are disconnects. Those are social emotional relationships, right? But maybe something else.
Let's talk about parents a little bit more. What did we do to reach out to parents during this time, and how did we, try to connect with parents? And also, what do we think we need to do as we move forward and we plan for school opening September 2nd for students, presumably? And how can we reach those parents, and what do we need to do to help them?
Well, I just would like to jump into the conversation a little bit backwards. I wanted to start with the one-to-one relationship. That really did become a key motivator to get students involved. One thing that Mount St. Mary's students in the teacher education program did do was work one-to-one with kids from Bishop Dunn. They worked in content areas, and they worked as to maintain friendships in relationship to the work that they were doing together. So that started in early March. They had access to Google Classrooms that Bishop Dunn had set up already, so that there was an easy flow, and they are continuing to do that over the summer. That one-to-one piece, according to all the parents that we have heard from, was tremendously helpful, because it was in addition to what teachers were doing. The school itself, which is a pre-K through 8 school, made every effort to reach out to the parents, to teach them how to access Google Classroom so they could see what the kids were doing. It took professional development directly to access the parents as much as it did to work with the kids. This summer, we have a program going that has students from Bishop Dunn at all ages doing literature circles together, book talks, but a particular program that I'm involved in has to do with creating Bishop Dunn as a sustainable environment. So kids are from grades 5 through 8 are doing work with composting. They're doing work to see what we do to preserve different aspects of our environment can be translated into mathematical solutions, essentially. And then they are also creating math trails regarding taking all of this together and having that move through the school. The benefit of this is that it is a small school and we have access. But reaching out was still incredibly difficult. And as economics played an issue with all of this, and parents' comfort level with technology and comfort level with asking questions and admitting what they know and don't know. So the kind of professional development provided for parents was very, very individualized as well. We had the ability to do it because we were moving forward in the direction to begin with. And this was incredibly beneficial for the college students as well as the school itself. But we don't have funding to do any of this. And so when I heard of the wonderful program that Margaret is doing in Patterns for Progress, that's the program, and reaching out to people in Westchester, there needs to be more funding to access the people, whether we continue virtually or not.
I want Yulia also wanted to share some observations. I was observing how my grandchildren, my son has 4 kids, and they're all different ages, 12, 10, 8, and 6. And it was interesting. Of course, everybody was taken unexpectedly, and everybody had to become virtual teachers. And it was interesting that first teachers were reaching on different levels. Teachers were reaching out to students different ways. Mm-hmm. I remember my daughter-in-law was impressed that teachers were sending cards just to stay connected with teachers. But my eldest granddaughter was very depressed. She missed schools. She wanted communication. She wanted, and what happened when they all were given assignments via Google Classroom, but there were very rare in-person meetings through Zoom or Hangouts, or there was, and when she was coming to those events, very few students would come. So she was very upset because she wanted to connect with students, connect with teachers, but not many virtual web conferencing meetings were arranged. But all the schedule, all the assignments were given on Google Classrooms. And my daughter-in-law was also learning about, as a parent, she was learning about different programs. She wanted to support. She saw that her children were going through emotionally. And I like that Yulia mentioned that it's not just socially, emotionally, kids were going through this. And she was looking for programs, especially as she was doing it also for her 6-year-old. Found the programs that were talking about these things and trying to explain what coronavirus is through those videos. And what I also noticed that authors, writers, health care providers were so generous. They were offering seminars, webinars, yoga sessions, and just to support people, support parents, support children. And I also was very proud of one of our students who was sharing social emotional programs for children, parents, and her colleagues using Facebook. Brittany, I forgot her last name, but it was just amazing how people and teachers, educators, health care providers were supporting each other during this time, challenging time. That's what I wanted to share.
I think, Andrea, I want to add in that I think earlier on, people said, you know, what gets why, you know, somebody was mentioning kind of the reasons a child goes to school. I think that actually most of the research shows that they don't go for us and they don't go for the curriculum. They go for their friends. They're going for the connection. That's, if you ask the child while they're there, why they're there, that's why. And one of the things that we as educators do very well that sometimes we don't even notice we're doing is that we create some rituals and routines that make us a family in that space, whether that's a college classroom or whether that's a kindergarten classroom. And what we have to do through online education is we need to lean into those routines and actually expand them and blow them up, because that's what brings people back. You know, you need to bring the high school mascot into your classroom. You need to bring the principal into your classroom who used to meet and greet at the front door. You need to go back to those rituals and routines and say, we're a family, because that's what brings people in the door. And so, and through that, you're going to get the portal to teaching. I think the other important thing is that the reason our one-to-one program, which was predominantly in terms of funding, that model actually worked on volunteers. We leveraged volunteers for that program. There are some overhead costs in terms of background checks and the STEM coaches that were behind those volunteers, but it's a pretty thin program. But what was critical to that program were the young adults. Again, who do those kids want to see? They don't want to see me. They wanted to connect to those young adults, because when those young adults come alongside the kids in those homework assignments, it's a completely different experience. They're in that kid's head in a different way, and the kid notices it. I think the third thing that we really leveraged was the notion that we have to look at what has been very positive about the COVID experience, which for most people has been more time with family. So we need to lean into doing projects that leverage family time. So don't complain about what we don't have, which is I can't do manipulatives for math, right? But lean into what you can do. And so that's been a very big principle. And I think the last principle, which I mentioned already, is the element of surprise. I've had the privilege of being part of something called the National Summer Learning Alliance, and I've been on their webinars from the moment we learned that we needed to transform our summer camp into a virtual program. And it's all about woo-hoo. Like, we have got to knock these kids' socks off. And I think the kind of the most inspirational message for me was the kids should feel every morning like they are charging out of the tunnel of the Superdome to head onto the field for the Super Bowl. And that's our job. And we've got to surprise them and bring that energy, because if we don't have that energy, they don't have a reason to be there. And that is, those have been the guiding principles for us that have really guided our work, that I think are, creating that connection so that we can do the work we want to do, which is academic support, academic project progress, and digital fluency, which I can't say frequently enough.
Margaret, I have a question. It's actually amazing how our conversation is branching, and there is a huge and very powerful chat going on, so worth to address as well. But Margaret, how do you address the fact when the kids are just having only one device provided by schools, and those devices are not badly, but heavily managed, and they're not allowing kids from different schools to communicate with each other, because it's like such an essential, yes, you said it so well, kids are coming to the school to communicate and network and just having fun. And here I am, here is Open Hub, teaching Girls Who Code after school programs, and we have kids from 5 schools, and they cannot get into one place to collaborate because those devices are not allowing it. How you were able to address that?
Yeah, so we then leverage kind of outside options to create links to things that they can get to, right? So creating central locations where they can go in. So for example, all of the clubhouses for our summer camp, even though we have kids in different squads, all of our clubhouses come into one Zoom link. So we make it really simple. Nobody can get confused. The place you get to our clubhouses is one link. And then from there, we can connect kids through breakout rooms. So again, we're leveraging technology.
Yes, but if schools are not allowing Zoom at all driven by privacy concerns, so that's the question.
Yeah, we also worked with the schools on that because Zoom actually corrected their platform. And so we went and advocated.
They did.
And we said, exactly. So we went and advocated and we convinced them to let us use that for the summer program and let us pilot it. So that is a big advocacy play, side that we have to play, which is not just to walk away and say, we're done. It's not going to work for us to work with Zoom, but to then get the lawyers literally to look at the documentation so that we could use the platform that we believed in. And we said, we're the tech experts. We believe this is the right platform. We believe they made the corrections. But I think that there has to be a simplicity of ways that they can engage. And then there has to be a responsibility on the part of the staff to understand that to give the staff permission that is the work. That is the work that we are doing. Because if we can get them to come, then we can get to the other work, such as the academic practice, such as regular attendance and so forth.
I believe Andrea can probably speak to the legal comments, constraints.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, with the passage of Ed Law 2D in January on July 1st, initially it was subpoenaed July 1st. It's since switched to October 1st, but schools are required to assign an employee or someone to act in the capacity of a data protection officer in schools. And one of the things that has to happen is that all of the third-party vendors have to agree to a certain set of expectations in terms of safeguarding student data. And it's pretty explicit, and there's a list that's required. The attorneys are largely in control of working with school districts and making those decisions. And so even if we were using a technology previously, we had to have the vendor then agree to the new requirements that were put forth with Ed Law 2D. So the game has sort of changed effective July 1st. People were really starting to actively think about it prior to July 1st. But that definitely did initially put some serious limitations there. And I think that Zoom, for instance, was not a tool that was at that point vetted in a way that people felt that it was a secure environment for teachers and students to use, to meet. That's since changed. Zoom has put additional controls in place. And so that tool is now one of the ones that can be used from across New York State. Google Meet meets those requirements as well now.
And Andrea, I want to say something that's also really important here, because the legal side of it is incredibly important, but more important is also educating the families. So we can talk about what laws are there to protect them, but really our role, if we quote unquote are tech experts, is to teach the families as well. So as part of our virtual mentoring program, every family went through a bilingual intake. The real purpose of that intake wasn't just to figure out when the student would be available and what would be the best time and how strong their Wi-Fi connection was and things like that. The real purpose of that intake was to educate the family backwards. Do you understand that this is like inviting a tutor into your home? We tell you that you should have an adult present. If you wouldn't leave your child alone with an adult in a room, don't leave them alone on a Zoom in a room. And so the laws are incredibly important, but the families don't understand those laws. What the families understand is an advocate talking to them about, to your point, Andrea, what are safe interactions online? And so we use our program Interview in taking those families as an educative moment for those families. My last point on parent education that we talked about, the question from earlier, is we did it completely wrong up front. We thought we would offer these group lessons and we would, give them the basics. And I don't know why we didn't from the beginning realize what we knew about kids, which is they need one-to-one. All of the parents are at a completely different place on their continuum of what they can or can't do online. They had very specific questions. So then we scrapped that and we went to offering a bilingual tech desk where basically they could put in a tech ticket, and we had bilingual tech assistants, volunteers from the community who would grab their questions one by one, because the group lessons were just not functional because the families were at really different places in their knowledge.
This is great notice.
Great, and I see a lot of conversation in the chat about parents being involved and working with their students, and some frustration over a lack of consistency, lack of consistent tools, lack of consistent platforms perhaps that are being used in the way that communication happened. And I heard that myself. And so I'm hearing a couple of different things, but I want to look at that a little bit in terms of as we look at improving student learning, and if they're not in the classroom with their teachers and their schoolmates anymore, how are we making it possible so that parents can find those assignments and support their student learning at home more easily? And what structures are we putting in place to really build that communication across the board with students and with our parents to enable engagement?
We had a person on staff who was given to the parents to contact. So parents could email that person whenever they needed assistance and support. We did do the group meetings as well, though, to hear what the parents' concerns were, more so than to educate them, but to really listen to them. And I think that was important. But they had a resource person. I don't think all schools were able to do that.
Right. And parent universities, some school districts did run parent universities. I know, for instance, Washingtonville, their website, they had quite a bit of information about parent universities. We, in Highland Falls, we had a teacher that was connecting with parents and doing one-on-one support for troubleshooting issues. We had a technician doing troubleshooting, and we had a parent, we had a teacher helping parents with the logistics of accessing content. But what other things did anybody else do?
And I have a question to add on to what everybody else did. When we're researching about the digital divide, how did educators deal with parents who did not have literacy skills, digital or even devices?
For example, we were told by school district, hey, have your family device, because the school provided Chromebooks are not stand up to do after school programming. And if the family cannot afford it, what do you do about that?
So I can speak slightly to that. The Hyde Park Central School District took an interesting approach with the expectations upon students. They greatly restricted the amount of work teachers were allowed to give to students in a week. And this is going to seem pretty drastic, but most teachers were limited to 2 hours of school work per week in each of their classes per subject. Yeah, so every one of my students, I could only give 2 hours of work per week. And as drastic as that sounded, I was really impressed that they came up with that number based on New York State Ed's learning from home expectation of a student's on medical having to learn from home. So how much time would they have had with a tutor on a weekly basis? And so it's an extreme one, and many of the districts around us were still trying to do synchronous learning when Hyde Park School said, no, what is the minimum that we should be providing so that we can get as many students as possible to be able to stay up on this? So it went from, 5 days of seeing 5 days a week of an hour of instruction each day direct with the teacher in person to 2 hours of asynchronous at home instruction. And it was a drastic change, but I appreciated that. And I thought that it was a reasonable approach and a realistic metric that they were pulling from.
Very interesting. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. That was a great point that he made. And also from the Newburgh standpoint, similar situation occurred, and that the typical grading system that instructors use, that the teachers used, dramatically had to change. And so that ABCD structure that we are used to was just chopped off, done, completely over with. You received a grading system 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so I think the pressure was alleviated on the student and the parent side, knowing that they didn't have to see that hard grade for a student. And also to share, also to kind of work off of what David was saying as well. There was a site in Newburgh where parents could go. It was just one site. It was a site where everything was listed out. If you want to know where the meals are, this is this. If you want to know how to get a device, this is where it is.
Was
if
it
you want to know
bilingual?
what pardon?
Was it bilingual?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
Hold on.
If you want to know where the information is about your students' sites that they're using, Google Classroom numbers, this is where this is. So having that clear-cut space to access whatever you need. If you need help from a psychological standpoint, we're kind of talking about that in the chat. This is where you go for that help. So that was something that I felt very, very strongly was a very good component of the Newburgh
Absolutely,
system.
absolutely. As soon as parents can get there.
Yes.
I would put a caveat in there, and I'm sure Newburgh thought about this, but it is kind of ironic that we're creating a web page for how to get online access.
For those who doesn't.
And I'm sure
Who
they
don't.
addressed it, but that's an interesting piece, is we need to realize that there's a barrier even to getting that information.
Well, it was the Newburgh website that it was housed on. And that is a hub that every single parent, student
Sure.
in the district uses religiously for every component. So it was not a new and unique space.
Yeah, we've
Right.
definitely found though that, we had to leverage WhatsApp, we had to leverage texting services, and we had to leverage videos. So we've been making an enormous number of videos. So even to explain to parents how this program virtually was going to run this summer, we would text out a video. We would text out a link to a video because the families cannot manage the verbal content of the websites. And this is such foreign territory to them that we really, really had to frequently explain. One thing, for example, is that a lot of the kids had iPads, and we needed to get the parents to understand that we wanted them to come back before the start of the program and swap that out for a Chromebook, that this program is going to be more functional on a Chromebook because then we could do screen sharing. And we had to do a video to explain that, because otherwise the parents would have been like, but I don't have to, they told me I don't have to return my device. So, and it's been fascinating too, even to watch the errors that we constantly make in how we post things. I can give you a really simple example. We wanted our summer platform to mirror the school experience because the whole goal of our summer program is to give kids digital fluency skills. And we thought we were being so intuitive. So for example, there's a topic, clubhouses, which are effectively their activity blocks. And then under it, we wanted them to find the link to go to the clubhouses, one link for every clubhouse. When we created it like we were in conversation with them, and we said, looking for your clubhouse, ? They couldn't find it. They needed a link that said, join clubhouse. That question, which we thought was so chatty and so personable, made no sense to them. Didn't make any sense to them. And so all of a sudden, within the first week, we've already gone in and changed all 12 classrooms because the language that we were using was not theirs. And it's so hard to see it until you're side by side with them in a Zoom session, and then you see it through their eyes and you're like, that's totally not intuitive. Because you're
great
seeing
user experience. This is great user experience.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margaret. So much to learn from your experience. Do we want to address the chat? There is so much going on right there, and we're about 4 p.m. already.
I need to say, I have to leave. I have another meeting at 4 o'clock. I'm hoping you are recording this.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Wonderful. And I hope this conversation is continued, but because it's a valuable conversation.
Absolutely. We usually have conversation. Bye, Sonia. We have conversation 3 to 4 only. But right now, I think we're in the middle of so much important discussions, and this discussion is branching through the chat, and we didn't address what's going on with colleges and workforce development programs as well.
I think a topic that we haven't really touched on is also that is again, that resilience piece. So what a
Yes.
child, and this is where you really work, I think, a little bit more with the older kids well, I mean, it's valid on all, but I think it really comes through when you're working with the high schoolers and the college kids, whom again, we continue to tag as digital natives. They have, not all, but many of them have very limited digital resilience. They hit a wall and they're like, can't do it, right? Or don't, oh, I guess I won't turn the assignment in. You know, and so I can give you a really clear example. For some reason, this particular young man whom I mentor was told that the assignment had to be turned in as a Microsoft Word document. He doesn't have Word, right? He's only ever used a Google platform. He didn't know that he could download a Google Doc as a Microsoft Word and not even have Word on his computer, but then ship it off to his professor. He failed the class. He failed the class. But here's the thing that really kills me on that, is that he had no sense of agency to go to anyone to find out, which I Googled within 2 minutes. I said, I bet you get that with your college tuition. I bet you have the entire Microsoft platform with your tuition. I Googled it on his college site. It was right there. He didn't know he had a digital assistance office, you know, whatever they called it, you know, their computer lab tech assistants. And he didn't know that he could just go to the professor. He had no sense of agency. And so this is where we see the interface of kind of the implicit bias and the structural issues that have these children who have grown up for so long kind of demurring and not wanting to bring any attention to themselves, have no sense of agency to work through and be resilient when they hit those walls in technology. And the true danger of this is that we continue to name them digital natives. They're not.
No, they're not. And what's come clear out of this conversation too is that while we're talking about technology and using the technology to connect to learning, by and large, the majority of our conversation has been about social and emotional learning, and that students are struggling with those skills, and that without that, it's very difficult to maintain their social and academic relationships and to really focus in an online format. Those social and emotional connections are what keep our students connected to our schools and actually engaged in learning. And that needs to be front and center when we start to talk about returning to school in September.
Thank you, Andrea. Saying that, let's open the floor for all participants because we have quite a rich crowd and there is a rich discussion. I see it's like about 50 messages at least going on right now. I will keep recording, saying that, in case if we do want this later, but I think maybe to stop Facebook live streaming. You tell me what to do, but the floor is yours. I see amazing people join this in silence. Please raise your hand or just unmute yourself and say, I have something to say.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Andrea and Yulia. Actually, I just wanted to say goodbye, and I wish we could keep the conversation going, but I've got family time too.
Thank you, David.
Thank you,
Stay
David.
healthy, everyone.
Thank you, David. We will keep recording.
I actually would like to throw something out there if I can. It's something I've been really grappling with since March, since our closing. And you can see from my background that this is a room in my home. So my private space, which was, you know, normally intended for myself, and I don't choose to have a photo in the background. This is just my space. That is now not a private space any longer. So as a teacher, I really feed off the engagement, seeing the understanding of the students, seeing how they're absorbing the lesson that's being taught. And an online situation, that's not there any longer at all. Cameras are not required for students when I teach a class. As I don't think it should be. I think it really does infringe upon their own privacy. So I was just curious what other people thought of that, and I just haven't seen any kind of discussion about that. I'm missing the student engagement, but we can't see them, and we shouldn't require them to be seen.
I I think that's a great point, Elizabeth. And that's one of the things that the teachers in Highland Falls also have brought up. I mean, and if you use something like Google Meet, right now, the functionality doesn't allow you to blur out the background the way I have my background sort of hidden right now. I know that that is one of the functions that Google is planning on adding to Google Meet, so that that would be possible. You'd be able to either add a virtual background or blur the background, because that's also a concern for students, student privacy in terms of where they're living.
Exactly.
And just to remove sort of that barrier so that they can feel comfortable being in a virtual setting without being uncomfortable because their home life is in some way exposed and up for judgment. Yeah, that's a problem.
Saying that,
And
I'm
may I-
stopping sharing.
So,
The floor is yours.
I'd like to speak to that as well. Coming from my own personal space, I don't choose to blur out my background either, because I want to normalize, this is my space and this is where I am. I understand that my students don't feel similarly, because in a socioeconomically disadvantaged area like Poughkeepsie, students will admit, I'm looking rough. I don't want to get on camera. I'm looking rough today. And it's understandable, but that's how we lose the connection with our students, by not being able to see them face to face. So we need to figure out a way to normalize the fact that, hey, I might not be looking the best today, but this is where I'm at. This is where I am. I want to see you. I want to see your dog. I want to see your brother. I want to see your parents talking in the kitchen, because I want to build that relationship with my students. Now, the fact that we don't have access equally is an issue that we need to discuss, not only on the district level, but on the national level, because it brings to light the issues where some districts have more and some districts have less, and that is being made exponentially clear at this time.
Absolutely.
I would say on that topic too, we actually learned from our national groups that we do a balanced experience, where when the children come in, they have to be completely open. So they have to meet and greet someone, hello, so that we know who they are, right? Because there's a privacy on the other side, which is who's coming into the meeting, right? So we require video on, audio on for a greeting, kind of in a waiting room, and then we send them from there. So we use the waiting room. I tell the people we train, I'm like, you're like the YMCA front desk, right? You're Joe at the front desk. Hey, it's so good to see you. You kind of hold them there, and you also can kind of take the temperature of where they're at that day, right? What do they need? There are some kids where the parent got them on, but the kid isn't there yet, right? And so that first person is so critical to them. But we require the video in that moment. We encourage the kids to use a virtual background. And again, going back to rituals, we give them virtual backgrounds. So unfortunately, I wasn't on my main computer. We have all of these tigers who are part of our virtual background, and they're our mascot. So we build those rituals and offer that up to them to say, we're a family. This is what we do together. So that's another option and approach, but just also understanding the role of the video and the safety of everyone in the room is that you do need that first check.
And I think some of the things that you've said, Meg, over and over actually is that it kind of keep coming back to this same thread for me, which is we've got to establish routines. We've got to be consistent. We've got to be predictable. We have to establish expectations right at the front of what it is we're doing, so that there is that regular schedule that students and parents can feel connected to.
So much to learn from this webinar. Actually, I'm happy we're recording this, and I believe it's just the foundation to go further, because we didn't address like half of the questions touch base in the chat.
Tom Morell raised his hand. Tom, do you want to put on your video and ask your question? Also, everybody, if you want, turn on your video so we can all see each other at a time.
Hi. Hi, now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, because I don't get out much, I work at West Point. And at West Point, of course, we sent all of our cadets home, or they were home for spring break and then didn't make it back. And then we had to adapt as well. Part of the challenge that our cadets had was heading back to a household in which it's not an environment for learning. When the child, or I use child, but when the cadet is at home, the parents don't recognize that they're really in that student role, right? Kind of like when you work from home. Like I work from home a lot, and when my grandkids are here, my wife's babysitting, they don't have this concept that I'm at work and don't know to just walk in the office, right? And I think that we probably need to educate parents in that same way of not only college kids but younger students as well, that when Jimmy is sitting there and trying to do a lesson, he shouldn't be bothered by his siblings. He shouldn't be asked, hey, can you go make this one a sandwich, or can you fill his cup with milk? Or many of our cadets had mentioned that when they were at home, it was such an environment in which much of their time was spent taking care of the household as opposed to taking care of their own learning.
Thank you. Anyone wants to respond? Otherwise, Cynthia's next.
Yeah, well, actually, I'd like to piggyback on what Tom was just saying is, we have to create an environment that is conducive to learning, whether that environment is in the classroom, traditional classroom that we're all used to. But the one thing that I wanted to expand on is, I teach at the college level, and I have to say that some of my colleagues were not prepared to move into the virtual arena, whereas I had been teaching in that space for a long time, synchronously and asynchronously. It's really hard work, and it's hard work for the parents that are trying to support the student or their child, right? It's hard work for the teacher. But at the end of the day, if you don't respond in a way that is supportive of the learning and the end goal, that's a problem. So I think, giving parents the skills that they need to support their child while they're learning, whether they are, changing the environment, the physical environment in the home, where there's a safe space to learn, and, where everyone gets that opportunity to learn. I don't think students are going to be able to put up the boundaries per se. They're going to want to, help their brother or sister, go get a sandwich, what have you. But teaching them that this is how you build that environment that's conducive to your learning, I think that's very, very important. It just takes some practice in some cases. I find for myself, I'm working out of my home office every day. And it's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to maybe not preserve that environment in a way where you're going to be productive. So we just have to be cognizant of what the end goal is. If the goal is to learn a specific lesson, or a goal is to, acquire a specific skill on that given day, do the best that we can with what we have, and teaching parents how to maximize the resources that they do have. I think that's very important. Instead of looking at what they don't have, I think supporting them and maximizing what they do have, I think that's important.
Don't forget they have full-time job usually in best case scenario.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How do we help people look at it from an asset perspective as opposed to a deficit perspective, and really build on those assets that they do already have? I think
Well
it's a very
said.
powerful mindset. Yes.
Well said. Michelle has something to offer, right? To say.
So I'm lucky my children are a little bit older, but it was a really interesting experience to find that one of my students who doesn't do well in a traditional classroom really excelled in the asynchronous environment where it was self-driven. He did great. His test scores were amazing. And then my daughter, who's a highly sensitive person, very empathic qualities, who high honor roll for majority of the year, really struggled in this environment, and especially in the synchronous meetings. So when she was in a room with all of the other students, she had a hard time feeling heard or seen, or feeling seen, and she really struggled. So it was interesting to see that some students really do well in that environment, while other ones, I think really struggled, whereas it may be completely opposite from what their normal in the traditional environment looks like.
And then of course I work remotely full-time as well. So we had to share bandwidth a lot. And I've got a really great internet connection. So, you know, to see it like freezing up for the three of us, you know, it created a lot of frustration, and it's hard to figure out, well, how do we balance these schedules, or how do I provide tech support when I'm also doing a meeting? And, you know, we try to create really consistent environment, but, you know, I have to wear a lot of hats during this. So it was
Great
a
notice.
learning experience.
Yeah.
Joe, you have something to say? I noticed. No? Yes? Joseph Chaika. You were raising your hand before. Unmute yourself.
Oh,
Tell something.
I was putting a thumbs up to somebody's remark, but I just wanted to circle back a little bit to the fact that housing security and food security is so critical.
Yes. Yes.
One of the speakers indicated, you're coming out of this football entry tunnel into the day, and you're charging in, and you've got to be psyched up for it. You've got to have everything sort of in place, and that doesn't necessarily happen, especially within the urban centers, and even in the suburbs and in the rural areas. There's a lot of poverty and people that are overcrowded and living in conditions that are just not conducive. So there's space issues, there's food issues, there's all of these barriers. But as people are getting more and more used to it, I see some things getting better. But it's a very difficult new normal. And to the conversation, Yulia, that we were having yesterday, to the point of data, all of these social issues, if there was a way that the districts could capture that data, that would be incredibly important and valuable as we learn lessons from these things.
Correct. Thank you.
That's so true. Let's do 3 more speakers or reflections, because we have maximum 10 more minutes left, and then we'll stop recording. You will feel free to hang out and network here. We didn't hear from John, Sarah.
I've been contributing a lot in the chat, so.
Okay, we will make sure those notes will be surviving. And your name is Emily, right? You're not Noelle?
That's right. How did you know that?
I have some magic tricks. Hello, Emily.
Yeah, I am Emily. Yeah, I live in the Hudson Valley, Westchester, but I teach CUNY undergraduate students through a fellowship program. So I'm not a professor per se, but I teach them through a fellowship program. And yeah, a lot of these issues are really really relevant. I'm so glad that I joined into this. We start a summer cohort on Tuesday, so I wanted to catch this before that point. And a lot of issues were raised that I really want to be sensitive to come Tuesday. Yeah, particularly interested. These students all live in various parts of New York City, mostly the outer boroughs for sure. And yeah, particularly sensitive to that idea of housing security. And they're adults, so they're not necessarily dealing with parents so much, although some of them definitely live with their parents. Some of them live on their own, but yeah, I have noticed that some students are more insecure about their background versus others, and or even their appearance, and that's just difficult. I don't know. I was particularly kind of taken by that conversation that we had today, because I noticed that with our spring group, that some students would, just typically have their video off, and it was sort of consistent who did that. And anyway, it's just hard. I don't know. That's some thoughts.
Just to summarize, I think we accomplished the first goal for today's webinar, and it looks like we have to continue with this discussion. Saying that, for housekeeping purposes, I will stop recording and I will stop live stream right now, and you can continue with networking, whatever is needed.
Well, Cynthia had her hand raised, so I would love to